This is Heal Your Mind, Heal Your Body with Dr. Schuyler. Discover how your thoughts manifest disease and what you can do about it. Here's your host, Dr. Schuyler.
Hello, beautiful souls, and I can finally say this, and I have been waiting so long to actually be able to say these words out loud. The book is out. It's out and proud. You can get it on Amazon. So I'll stop sales pitching that. I've just waited a really long time to say that, so I finally want to say it. Last episode, we were talking about the 4 methods of the mind-body connection, what actually makes up the mind-body connection. And last week, we were talking about the 4 methods of science. And this week, we're talking about the 4 methods of psychology. So I talk about the 8 mind-body methods to help end anxiety, gut, and autoimmune issues. So last week was for science. This week is for psychology. The actual meat and potatoes, and for those vegetarians, the tofu and the potatoes of the book. The mind, the body, the science and psychology, and what is the interplay, like a Venn diagram, like what's that gray area in between. So a little brief recap. Last week for the science, it was talking about emotions are the glue that bind the mind to the body, automatic negative thoughts, stress contagion, and the limbic brain, the fight, flight, and then something also called the frozen, when you get pushed so far, your nervous system collapses within itself. So today we're going over the psychology of it. So the 8 mind-body methods to empower your child. So we're going to start with what we can do to learn the leverage of psychology behind healing. And my colleague and I, Dr. Louis Damas, we came up with a safety-based protocol, the Central Florida protocol, that we use something called a polyvagal theory and gut-directed hypnotherapy to reduce symptoms of IBS in our participants. And we published our work together. It's out. And he actually also published something on trauma and attachment style, the role of implicit memory in the development of recovery from trauma-related disorders. His article takes a really deep dive into things like the attachment style. And I give it a deep dive, but not as deep as the article. And that's part of the things that we talk about in the psychology behind trauma, the psychology behind the mind-body connection. And we can learn to leverage the psychology behind healing. So when we understand the psychological factors in the disease process, we really break down these psychological influences, like attachment styles, chronic invalidation. That's just the more of a professional way of saying gaslighting. So for the rest of the episode, I'm just going to use the word gaslighting, but clinically, chronic invalidation is the more proper way to say it. Secondary gains and the healing phases. So these are psychological factors that contribute to the development and the management of anxiety, chronic illness, and GI disorders. So attachment styles, ones that hurt and ones that heal. We're just going to briefly overview the psychology behind these methods. And there are 2 episodes out on attachment styles. And I highly recommend Dr. Damas's work as well, reading that. But the attachment styles, they influence how we respond to stress and how we form relationships throughout our entire life, whether it be through partners, through coworkers, through friends. And attachment styles can be in 4 different ways. And I talk about this, but just a brief overview why attachment style is so important in the psychology of healing your child. The anxious attachment style, I call them the be careful parent or the bulldozer parent. And this is characterized by a fear of abandonment and intense emotional responses. And this style can lead to heightened stress and anxiety, and it really has an impact on physical health. Most of the parents that I treat are anxious attachment style, as well as the children. Avoidant attachment is characterized by emotional distance and this hyper sense of self-reliance. Like, I once knew someone that was avoidant, and he had surgery. And I was like, oh my God, who took care of you? Because he had, kids that would speak to him and no loved ones around. And he's like, no one. I'm like, you had major surgery and you just went home alone? He's like, yeah, I just took care of myself. I found that just fascinating. It was just a fascinating case study for me. So avoidant attachments have this exceptionally high sense of self-resilience, and they suppress their emotions. They deny others to express theirs, and this can lead to this chronic stress and is associated with health problems. I often see, I talked about this before, avoidant parents often have children with autoimmunes. So disorganized. This is a mixture of both attachment style. It's characterized by lack of coherent coping. And this is how I can best describe it. You see a mom on the phone. Yes, hi. Oh my God. Of course I'll be there. I'm so excited. Yay. I'll meet you at Starbucks. Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so excited. Hangs up the phone. Turns to the child. What are you doing? I was on the phone. And starts screaming. It's this black and white, Jekyll and Hyde. And the child doesn't know whether the parent's going to come in bonding or the parent's going to come in screaming. And this style is associated with higher levels of stress and greater risk of psychosomatic illnesses. A secure attachment, I like to call these the lighthouse, is characterized by trust and a sense of safety. This is where a kid can speak up. Hey, I'm completely uncomfortable with what you're saying right now. I respect what you're saying, but I'm uncomfortable with it. They can say this to almost anybody because there will not be a repercussion for saying how they feel as long as it's done in a respectful manner. And individuals with a secure attachment are generally better at managing stress and have less illnesses and disease, anxiety, and gut issues. So the other one is gaslighting, chronic invalidation. You shouldn't be crying. I'll give you something to cry about. You're making no sense right now. You're too emotional. You're too sensitive. My all-time. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. And what this means in code is your emotional reaction is making me really uncomfortable. I always tell these little anecdotal stories. I just find them so fascinating clinically. I once had someone tell me I shouldn't feel that way. And because it didn't make logical sense to that person. And I thought, what? I just kind of sat there. I'm like, what do you mean I shouldn't feel that way? And the person says, I need you to explain to me your feelings in a logical, science-based manner in order to prove that they are valid. I'm like, I sat there and plugged. I'm like, what? I'm like, I feel really uncomfortable with this. And the person goes, show me the evidence where silent treatment is linked to disease response and anxiety. I'm like, hey, I just said I don't feel important or cared for when I get the silent treatment. The person's like, well, that makes no sense. You have to prove it. So I collected all this data and I proved that silent treatment actually leads to disease process and stress. Needless to say, I didn't really speak that human after that. And that's a good example that I inadvertently hear sometimes dads say, and albeit a much gentler way, because men are way more logical than women. It is what it is. It's a more logical way of thinking, a more process way of solving problems. And oftentimes men don't understand why we are so emotional. And then we lead with our emotions and they want a logical explanation for why we feel something because it doesn't make sense. And if we can explain it in a logical way, then they can then empathize with it. Okay, now that makes logical sense. But the problem happens is as women, it's very difficult for us, even more difficult for children to explain what we feel is valid, whether we have to prove we feel that way or not. So we have to prove why we feel something and back down and defend why we feel something. It just causes more of a discord. So when we tell your child you shouldn't feel that way, and the child's like, yeah, but I do feel this way, and they want to defend why they feel this way, you're on what I call the merry-go-round of misery. Now you're arguing why you feel some way. So this can be a very gentle form of gaslighting, or it can go to a very extreme term, like where physicians can gaslight often. Bosses are infamous for gaslighting. It's when our needs are constantly dismissed, and this is the psychology behind why our children feel sick. Chronic invalidation or gaslighting, you shouldn't be crying. Why are you crying? You shouldn't be upset. You shouldn't be mad. Those are all gaslighting statements, and it leads to someone feeling worthless, depressed, and anxiety. So it undermines someone's self-esteem and their ability to understand their own emotions, because if a parent saying you shouldn't feel sad, the kid feels sad. Parents convincing them why they shouldn't feel sad, but the kid still feels sad. It's gaslighting. The kid gets really confused. And this chronic invalidation disrupts the brain-gut access and the immune system. So I have these patients who are always telling me, I feel so dismissed by my parents. And I then can't go tell them, hey, your kid feels dismissed. I can't break confidentiality. So it's another pink elephant in the therapy room where I'm sitting around with my hands tied behind my back. Parents chronically invalidating the child's getting sicker, has more anxiety, more gut issues, now depressed, now wants to have unpleasant, unaliving thoughts. So this is where the podcast and the book come in. I get to gently say, hey, gaslighting makes our kids feel more anxious. And if you ever been gaslighted by a medical community or a partner or a boss or even a teacher, kind of know how it feels. What you can do in opposition to this, conversely, is something you can do is something called practice active listening. And someone once said that to me. I kind of had this really cool job in California, and I was working as a buyer for a swimwear store. Man, I love my job. It was really cool. So I went to dinner with the owner of the store, and I'm working my way up, and she's talking, and she stopped me, and she says, "Skylar," she's like, "You're not listening to me." I'm like, in the South, we say, "Yes, ma'am." "Yes, ma'am, I am, actually." And she says, "No, you're not." And she stopped, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting ready to get my butt handed to me. She goes, "I can see you thinking the whole time that I'm talking, all you're doing is waiting to reply to me. You're not listening to a single word that I'm saying." She's like, "You're not listening to me. I'm not going to argue with this very powerful CEO." And she had it right. So in that moment, she taught me what active listening is. Active listening is when you're not thinking thoughts and what your reply is going to be. You're actually just listening to the person talk. So as parents, as our kids talk, we're just thinking what our rebuttal is going to be, what our reply is going to be. But I'm asking you to do what that one beautiful soul did for me. She taught me, shut up in your own mind and listen to what I'm saying. I got something I want to teach you. When our kids are talking to us, they're teaching us something. And we're so busy trying to teach them and impart knowledge upon them, we're not learning about our children. We're not listening to them. So another awkward pink elephant in the room that gets talked about in the book. So far, the psychology behind it. We have got the attachment style, anxious attachment style. We've got gaslighting, and the gaslighting that comes with active listening, kind of the counterbalance to gaslighting. And the third one is kind of huge. I think the third one, by far, hands down, is the biggest pink elephant in any therapy room, in any doctor's office, to be quite frank with you. And it's secondary gains. The secondary gains that we subconsciously, secretly, hidden in the dark recesses of our subconscious mind, we at some level gain something from our behaviors. And secondary gains refer to the indirect benefit someone receives from being like sick or ill or having an emotional reaction. And I talk about this in my story very openly, because if someone's going to talk about pink elephants in the room, might as well point the four fingers back at me and talk about my flaws. My secondary gain was nurturing. I love to get in the nurturing. And that was my personal story. Some people like the sympathy. Some people gain financial support. And most of the time with kids, the secondary gains are they're off the stress hook. They don't have as many responsibilities or expectations to meet up. So think of a secondary gain as a subconscious pressure cooker, a relief valve, a get out of jail for free card. While the primary gain of being sick might be symptom relief or out of life's pressures, out of schoolwork, out of social anxiety, I really want to emphasize they are so subconscious, you guys. Your kid's not thinking, oh, I want to miss school, I'm going to get sick. Now, later on down the line, yes, they do that. But by then they're already sick and you can't tell which one's sick and which one's a secondary gain. The benefits of being associated with being unwell can create a psychological barrier to recovery. Secondary gains perpetuate the illness and reinforce the sick role. So children sometimes find it difficult to recover, even adults. Oh my gosh, I have secondary gains all the time. Talk about with my adults. In a podcast coming up with Sarah, we talk about her secondary gains with her mast cell activation. So it's not just children, it's adults. Children and adults may find it difficult that if they lose this support of being sick, that their responsibilities are going to increase. So understanding these second gains while you're reserving judgment or directly confronting them about it is this soft, gentle way of addressing this ginormous pink elephant in the therapy room, because this is one you've got to squeeze and move around with grace and ease, because you will get squished by this. And what I have noticed, if you confront a child or any human on that fact too soon about their secondary gains, you will get squished. The pink elephant will get bigger and the child or the person will double down on getting sicker. A very common secondary gain is not attending school, and studies show if your child begins to avoid school, that behavior gets reinforced, and then they no longer want to go to school And we've seen this with COVID. How many children are homeschooled now? And we reward the fear. We feed the secondary gain. Or even just completing homework assignments. I'm too sick. My stomach hurts. Relief valve gone. Assignment gets to go away. The hard part about this is the assignments pile up and the kid even gets sicker. So the parent's goal is to decrease the value of the secondary gains. And you can do this, without judgment. Oh my God, I'm so sick. I can't do this. I can't go on. And a good thing I like to tell kids is, I can imagine it may sometimes feel good to miss school. I totally get that. It's something we'll have to talk about, though. But I can see how it feels pretty cool to miss school. That does not mean to rhyme, but it rhymed. I can see how it feels pretty good to miss school. Or another one is, hey, when you're ready to talk about it, I will be too. It's just kind of acknowledging that, hey, I get that it feels kind of good to miss out on this and not have all the responsibilities. But at some point in time, we have to instill grit into our children, and they're screaming and yelling, don't go, and I don't want to go. And one of my kids is a little neurodivergent, never tested, but she just kind of fits the criteria. It's brilliant, beautiful little mind. And when she was 7, I knew I had to work through these phobias that she had. And so working through the phobias, and she's about 11 years old, and she has to go to swim practice, and she's getting kind of weirded out about the kids peeing in the pool, basically. She didn't want to get in the pool with other kids who might be peeing in the pool. So she's just having this obsessive meltdown about pee getting on her skin. And she's got to go to swim lessons. Like, it's non-negotiable. So I drop her off. We still laugh about this. I drop her off, open the door. She's like, but Mama, you understand. There's going to be pee on my skin when I get back in the car. Do you want pee on your leather seats? Like, she's arguing with me, like, why all these legitimate reasons she should not have to get in the swimming pool. And I literally took my foot and I pushed her out and I said, baby, I love you. Be just fine. And I took the towel and I kind of tossed it out the window. I'm like, don't forget your towel. And she looked at me and she's like, what? And that's kind of that thing. And we laugh about it now. I literally moved my foot on her butt and pushed her out the door. There's a time and a place when you foster your kid freaking out, and a time and a place when you just push some grit and resiliency on them. And, we laugh about it all the time now. You can foster it, and then sometimes you just got to be a parent. And it's just knowing when to be a parent and not being too soft. And if I was to let her avoid that swim lesson, that girl can logic her way out of anything. She would have logic her way out of school, logic her way out of swim lessons. She can logic her way out of anything. So it's not giving in to their every single whim because we're scared of parenting. So it's this line of validating them, but also parenting them. And I think that's the hardest thing as a parent is, when do you call it? And one of the things to help kind of gauge when you call it, and it's the 8th method in the psychology aspect of it, is understanding what phase of life they're in. So if my daughter back then would have been in some victim martyr phase, and I literally threw booty out the door and threw a towel at the window and said, have fun at swim lessons, she would have made my life miserable when she got home. But I knew she's in a healthy mindset. She was kind of in this kicking life's butt, doing really, really good, thriving in all areas of her life. So she could handle a little extra push to gain some grit and resiliency. When our kids are sick with autoimmune anxiety or gut issues, they subconsciously go through these phases of healing, and they can exhibit these phases of healing any time. And I went over these before in the podcast called Healing Phases. And in short, they're victim, martyr, survivor, thriver, and warrior. And I really elaborate these in the book. It's actually, I think we just uploaded it as a free chapter on the website too, by the way. So to really get into this, it's in the book, but just kind of for a 30,000-foot view, at any phase in our life, not just during times of trauma or sickness, we can pretty much put our life in this phase. Do we feel like a martyr, a victim? Like we're barely holding on, we're surviving. And what's difference between martyr and victim energy and survivor is one thing. It's accountability. So the line of demarcation, if your child is accountable for their role in their health versus they are a victim of their role in their health. And I go into this in great detail. And survivor holds themselves in accountability. And then thriver means you're doing really, really good in life. So when I, kicked, quote unquote, Lily out of the car, she was in thriver mode. I wasn't worried about, harming her anyway. And then warrior is when you repurpose the pain. This is one of the last chapters in the book. How do you take your child to a place where their cup runneth over, that they feel like this warrior? But if you were to take any snapshot of your life, like a Polaroid, and look at it, I bet you can pinpoint you felt like a victim, a martyr, you were barely surviving, you were thriving, or you were a warrior. And I get into the different phases as the 8th method in the psychology of it. So in total, when you kind of break this down, it's understanding what phase your child is in and how you then react and respond and talk to them during these phases. We can't force our children out of victim mode, martyr mode, or pretty much any of the phases. So please don't try to say, hey, you're acting like a victim, snap out of it. Rather, model for them what it looks like. And the other day, we had this beautiful, huge rainbow over the lake at the back of our house. And I kid you not, you could see the start to the finish. And of course, my little logic kid brain's like, that's just an illusion. You can't really see it. And she's having this scientific discussion with me. How come you really can't tell where the rainbow ends? And I just stopped and I'm like, look at all the colors. And I literally had this childlike moment. I was like, look how purple the purple is. Look how yellow the yellow is. This is so brilliant. Look how beautiful. And I feel like I'm seeing a rainbow for the first time in my life. And I look back and they're like cracking up, laughing at me. Mom, have you ever seen a rainbow before? I'm like, well, yeah, but look at the beauty of this rainbow, you guys. This is just magnificent. And I'm studying every color of this rainbow as if it's my first time seeing it. And then they're laughing, but they're secretly, I can tell, we're like, that's pretty cool. My mom's looking at the rainbow as if she's looking at it for her first time. And that's modeling for them what it looks like to live in gratitude. I'm not forcing them, look at the rainbow, appreciate it. They're laughing their butts off at me, thinking I look crazy and silly. But I can see them also like secretly really marinating in the moment with me. And I look over and Ella's writing down in this book of funny things mom says. She's over there writing down in this book, funny things mom says. And I think it made the book actually. But I wasn't trying to. I was genuinely modeling for them inadvertently complete sheer gratitude for such a beautiful moment in time, what we call glimmers. So you can't shift your child out of these phases, but you can model for your child what thriving feels like. You can model for them what warrior feels like. You can model for them what gratefulness feels like. Once you can start modeling this self-efficacy, this gratitude, therein lies the shift for them, their desire to feel better internally. When we're looking at the psychology methods of this, when you can bring awareness to your attachment style, bring awareness if you have been gaslit or chronic invalidation, if you're inadvertently invalidating your child, if they're experiencing secondary gains, what phase of life they're in, what phase of life you're in. Do you feel like a victim to your circumstances? Do you feel like you're barely hanging on? Do you feel like a survivor? Are you still healing from your own trauma? And is that trauma spilling over onto the kids? And that's so common and that's okay. No judgment. This is just bringing awareness and talking about these pink elephants that lead to mind-body connection like anxiety and gut and all these thyroid conditions and autoimmune conditions and GI conditions. And the book offers solutions. So this is just this awareness into what's contributing to this epidemic levels of autoimmune, doubled anxiety, depression, and suicide since COVID. Let's start talking about these things that no one wants to talk about. Let's just get it out there. Let's figure out why our children are sick and what we can do as parents, what we can do as humans to help ourselves feel better so our kids feel better. And really with no judgment, taking a look at our attachment styles. If you're anxious or avoidant, can you check your ego at the door and learn to maybe try to start doing something a little bit different and how that can impact. And if you heal ourselves, we heal the world. And, I hear that said all the time. And it wasn't until I finished up this book and was writing the second book, it's Rewiring Your Heart. And it's, looking at how our heart stores more memories in our brain. The heart sends memories up to the brain. And I started to realize, wow, I know what that saying means. When you heal yourself, your vibes heal, your energy heals, your attachment style heals, your gratitude goes up. That infects, graces, spreads all around. So it's, in short, empowering your child to heal in the most gentle, loving way is about empowering yourself to heal. Learning that what you may be doing or what may have been done to you or your grandmother, the decisions your grandmother made impact you today. The way that she felt, the way that she moved through life, the decisions, the way she was spoken to, all are influence your life today. How you are influencing your child and what accountability measures can you take on how you influence your child. Next week, we're going to get into the power of language and the power of silence and how wise and knowingness silence can hold and when to use silence, when not to use silence, and how your words can either sabotage your child or heal your child. So if you can take anything away from this, I think what's coming up the next episodes and what's I've talked about in previous episodes and what's the culmination of this book, culmination of these past 2 episodes. Words, energy, matter. They make a difference in our children's lives. And if you can learn one thing about your own childhood, how you were treated, how you were spoken to, how that impacts your life today. I had someone say to me, I thought of your book as healing my own inner child. So I have people without children getting this book, seeing it from perspective, healing your own inner child. And she's right. I go back and read it as if I wasn't a parent. I'm like, yeah, it is kind of healing your own inner child because understanding how much all of your parents impacted you and their grandparents, the science and psychology, the 8 methods. So I can end the podcast the same way I started it by saying the book is finally out. Empower Your Child to Heal. Amazon. It's actually on Ingram Spark and Draft to Digital too. So there's different ways you can find it. I'm asking people, this is a homegrown book, literally. Homegrown from my pain, homegrown from my child's pain, and homegrown from my patient's pain. And it's really written because I want to make a difference in this world. And I can't keep working 12 hours a day to heal the world. I want to heal the world in masses. And so this book was written genuinely to teach parents we can heal our children. I did it. I help children, and this is my knowledge I want to impart upon you. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time on this, and I hope you guys literally, figuratively, emotionally, all that, metaphorically, learn and heal and grow from this book. And if I say this all the time, if the depths of my suffering can serve one purpose, then I have fulfilled my divine life purpose. I send you all an abundant blessings. Thank you for your time. I feel so grateful you have listened to the end. When we begin to understand how our body manifests stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, and even unexpressed emotions, we then create a space, a bandwidth in our minds to begin to heal our bodies. Healing is a decision, and I am grateful for yours. Abundant blessings, Dr. Schuyler.
To learn more about the work Dr. Schuyler is doing, please visit drschuyler.net. That's drskYler.net. And remember to subscribe to this podcast wherever you like to listen.
Produced by Audavita Studios. Connect your voice to the world.